So now we go to Beatrice. We're a global industry with a global regulatory framework. What trends are you seeing in the regulatory and legal environment, and how can these facilitate shipping's decarbonization agenda going forward? Beatrice, please.
Yes, hello to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I think on regulatory environments, the most important in our industry remains the international regulations. That is what comes out of the IMO. There's no question about it. We have seen, well, we not just represent the banks, but also the owners, and we have seen a shift, a massive shift, which was just before IMO 2020, and which keeps going on actually. Interestingly, Abhishek was mentioning the cruise industry, and we have seen massive changes there of people looking towards greener, more energy conscious ships in order to comply with regulations, and not just with existing regulations, but with future regulations. I think there is an anticipation that this won't be the last change. There will be more changes coming, because all of us, you, me, everyone at a personal level, and companies, corporates at a larger level, we don't just always do the right thing. But if there's a regulation telling us what to do, or that if we don't comply, there will be consequences, that's where we then change our attitudes, where we move forward. The Poseidon Principle is very helpful in this arena, but ultimately, I think you need you need regulations not just in one part of the industry. You need it industry-wide, which are consistently applied. We have seen it in the recycling sector, where we do get a lot of inquiries on green recycling now, and if you look, the regulations aren't uniform across the world, so you do get differently green or not green recycling. So I do think there is more change coming, definitely, in this. People are starting to anticipate it, and my impression is that we are reaching tipping point, that something will happen soon. Does that answer your question, Espen?
Yes, it does, but we will come back and I think delve a little more into the in some of the detail, not least what's going on right at the current time at the IMO. But thank you, Beatrice, for that. Let's go back to your comments about regulation. You quite correctly, in my view, said that there has been and is a shift going on. There's a trend towards the green, quite rightly and correctly, and that regulation is necessary. We, however, have a situation where developed nations believe that IMO is not going fast enough, and developing nations think it's going way too fast. And we've seen this even as we speak. MEPC 76, the debate is in full flow, to put it mildly. At a European level, we keep hearing that there's great impatience and that IMO is simply too slow and it doesn't get the job done. But equally, as an industry, I think there's broad agreement that we need a global regulator in order to have a level playing field, to use that much overused term. But how do you, from your vantage point, how do you see this? Will the Europeans prevail in this debate? Will they go alone, or will they eventually close ranks and have the IMO as the global regulator? So over to you.
Yeah, can I just very quickly, before I come to the question, just add something to Abhishek and Paul's points earlier. There was talk about particularly the leasing houses, and we do a lot of that. And for me, leasing is actually only another financing model. And behind the leasing houses, often you will have a bank. So if you do get the banks with Poseidon, it will trickle down through the leasing houses. I don't think it's actually, you know, quite as black and white as it might look at first glance. I do agree that there's a real issue for the sort of SME owners in the market to get capital at decent rates, but I think the competition from the leasing houses doesn't necessarily mean that the sort of green element of the Poseidon principles will be lost. Of course, you know, it will be preferable if they sign up, as Paul was saying, but because they do want to refinance themselves in the market, they're going to have to comply as well. So it sort of gets passed down. It's useful, you know, whatever, because it's there. Sorry, that was just a little add-on. So going back to your question, I don't know is the answer. I have been actually asking around. I used to work for the UK Export Credit Agency, and of course the export credit agencies have been for a while very strong, particularly the European ones in the ESG sectors. They were amongst the first to adopt, you know, in-house principles and lending principles, and follow on big projects, not just shipping projects, but projects generally, environmental guidelines. So, and I do think, like you say, there is impatience here in Europe, but also there is fear that if they go it alone, there will be a race to the bottom. So my personal view is that they are probably going to address this at the international level, because, you know, again, unless we have an international consensus, it won't be helpful. Although Sven was correct, or was it Paul who said, you know, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So, you know, you can do a certain amount with regulations on a national level, and to an extent the Europeans probably these days are seen as an almost national level, because it's a certain number of countries moving together forwards. But you will not see the large changes you need to see if you will, we will have, if the IMO, well, legislates them, for want of a better word. I do see the IMO for our industry as a major legislator, and the most important legislator we have. And the other national legislation sort of feed into this, and hopefully will achieve together another change. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. Yes. Beatrice, if I could just change the subject and ask you a specific question that I have, and
Okay.
people would like to hear your views on this. How much is shipping being changed by ESG requirements? I mean, I think a lot of people didn't really know what ESG was until perhaps maybe a year or two ago, but it seems to really have taken hold, and of course particularly so in the larger public companies, where, you know, the demands of customers are great. But if I could hear your comments on that, and then it'll be soon time to wrap up.
We have definitely seen an uptake of it creeping into the contractual frameworks where you wouldn't necessarily expect it, like charter parties. Very important, you know, as far as financing goes, charter parties are probably one of the cornerstones, but also the whole loan documentation. Paul and Abhishek's Poseidon principles do creep in, which is positive, because it moves in that direction. You mentioned the sort of large public companies, they're at the forefront of this, but I wouldn't say that the smaller owners or medium-sized owners aren't just as interested, because they're, you know, they're not stupid, they know it's coming, so they're all looking at it, although they prefer to take the wait and see attitude for the moment because they can't afford it. So if there was more investment available, I'm sure they would be, and it would change shipping even more, and particularly the contractual frameworks which are there. I think What hasn't happened yet, and which goes probably to your previous questions on what happened with the pandemic, because I think that's put a little bit of a brake on some of the things. I think there is movement in the market towards finding all sorts of different financing forms. And I think we're seeing that now with the ongoing pandemic, and some companies, you know, for example, the cruise companies, but also some of the larger oil and gas companies needing different financing forms and looking at alternative ways of pulling together different types of resources, bonds, traditional financing, leasing financing, and diversifying not just their portfolio, but in respect of individual projects. And I think all of this, you know, situation we're in currently is quite precarious for a lot of owners. And yes, it probably changes things at an accelerated rate. And ESG, if we all play our part, can be part of this change, which is ongoing in the industry. And the pandemic can work, well, for the good in a way, rather than just being the brake it's been currently. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.